Today, we are going to answer the most pressing question of our time. Is Die Hard a Christmas movie? The answer is yes. Yes, it is. But in order to answer this question, we need to take a brief but nuanced journey through art history and the cultural cycles it goes through, which will be sure to make all of your art professors yell at me in the comments, but we're going to do it anyway. So strap in, ladies and gentlemen, while we answer this question of why Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So off the bat, this is a video of the director of Die Hard talking about how he based themes of Die Hard on the movie It's a Wonderful Life. What I want to do in this video is discuss It's a Wonderful Life and Die Hard and their cultural context in which both were made in. Because when it comes to art, whether it's a movie or a book or a painting, in order to truly understand them, we need to understand the time and context in which they were made. And to understand the full context in which both these movies were made, we need to understand the historical cycles movies have gone through in the 20th century and how we got here. But first, some history. The thing you need to know about art for this video is that art goes in historical cycles, and specifically the cycles in how art reflects social values and social hierarchies of the time.
Oh, come and see the violence inherent in the system! Help, help, I'm being repressed, bloody peasant! Oh, what a giveaway. Did you hear that? Did you hear that, eh?
With the advent of the motion picture camera, we are now able not only to depict what life is actually like, but we're able to also visually tell grand narratives that were only reserved for the ceilings of chapels before this time.
Your knights of the Round Table shall have a task to make them an example in these dark times.
Good idea, O Lord.
Of course it's a good idea!
As an aside, and I can't remember where I read this, but legend has it that Hollywood sprouted up in Southern California because Edison was notoriously strict about using his patents for the motion picture camera. So much so that he essentially tried to monopolize the nascent film industry. So like with a lot of artists before and since, the artists of the time said all that nonsense and took his camera to California and started making movies far, far away from his lawyers. But I digress, and back to eventually getting to the point of this video, which is why Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So when we finally started making movies, we started telling stories at a scale we weren't able to before this. This coincides with the roaring 20s.
Stay away from jazz and liquor and the men who play for fun.
This era was marked by technological innovation and prosperity. And films of that era reflect that. Movies not only in their visual and emotional themes like Metropolis and The Jazz Singer reflect this technological innovation and prosperity, but also the scope of the grand stories that are being told, like Ben-Hur and The Thief of Baghdad. Cycles of the 20th century went something like this. In the 40s, we had this little thing called World War II that was happening. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. So movies were a lot about patriotism, the war effort, traditional values, and escapism.
He's looking at you, kid.
With a pinch of cynicism about all of that thrown in. The 50s and 60s, we're back to grand narratives. We're back to musicals.
I like to be in America, okay by me in America.
Big westerns, set pieces, and rugged individualism. Late 60s and 70s were far darker and grounded and existential in the stories they were telling.
What do you think of me?
What do you mean?
You've known me nearly all your life. You must have formed some opinion of me.
Well, I always thought that you were a very nice person.
Did you know I was an alcoholic?
What?
Which reflected the Vietnam era and a generation grappling with its place in the world. By the late 70s and 80s, we move into a mix of all of these things. We have grand narratives that make a strong comeback with the advent of the blockbuster, but we're still telling stories of a society in an existential crisis.
I'm in a world of shit. Yes, but I am alive, and I am not afraid.
And stories reminiscent of the rugged individualism of the 50s and 60s. Okay, So, what does this have to do with Die Hard? And what does it have to do with it being a Christmas movie? Plot twist. We got to go back to the 40s to answer this question. Remember how I just said that the 40s were marked by themes such as traditional values of the war effort and patriotism? Well, it's a little bit more complicated than that. A lot of the movies in the 40s were grounded in the individual's duty to the community as a whole. They were stories that promoted collective ideals above the wants or needs of the individual. But it was our duty and responsibility as individuals to uphold the ideals of our communities. We have to also remember that right before World War II, we lived through this thing called the Great Depression. So a lot of the movies in the 40s explored socioeconomic disparities and were critiques of capitalism. We see this most starkly in movies like Citizen Kane, Grapes of Wrath, and How Green Was My Valley, which was John Ford's best movie, Fight Me. In the case of Citizen Kane, that was a movie about the downfall of putting personal ambitions and lust for power above the community and personal relationships. It's a movie that masterfully wove critiques of capitalism, the downfall of ambition, and for better or for worse for the community, the impact one person can have on the world. There's also another movie that did this, and some say it is the Christmas movie of all time. That movie is called It's a Wonderful Life.
Merry Christmas, you wonderful old building and loan! Hey! Merry Christmas, Mr. Potter! Happy New Year to you! In jail. Go on home.
We did it. We made it to Christmas. I don't know how many minutes in, but we did it. We're at Christmas. Almost to the point of this video. So, what is It's a Wonderful Life about? Briefly, it's about a guy named George Bailey, played by Jimmy Stewart.
Remember this, Mr. Potter, that this rabble you're talking about, they do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath? Anyway, my father didn't think so. People were human beings to him, but to you, a warped, frustrated old man, they're cattle. Well, in my book, he died a much richer man than you'll ever be.
I'm not interested in your book. I'm talking about the building and loan.
I know very well what you're talking about. You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on, and it's galling you. That's what you're talking about, I know.
And see, George, as a young man, had ambitions to leave his town and chase his dreams. However, he sacrificed his dreams to run his family business called the Bailey Building and Loan.
Merry Christmas, you wonderful old building and loan!
Which is important because his family business helped working class people, common people, buy homes.
They do most of the working and paying and living and dying in this community. Well, is it too much to have them work and pay and live and die in a couple of decent rooms and a bath?
Which is what brings us to the primary antagonist of the story, Mr. Potter. Mr. Potter is a man who is very similar to Orson Welles' character in Citizen Kane. He is a man that embodies greed. He's all about personal ambition and lust for power over the needs of the community. To him, the community is just a means to an end to make money.
You're talking about something you can't get your fingers on.
He has no personal values other than siphoning money off of everyday people in order to make himself richer. George, knowing this, makes sacrifice after sacrifice in his life to keep his business running as a bulwark for the community against the vile Mr. Potter. Now, on Christmas Eve, George's uncle puts the Bailey Building and Loan at risk by losing a large sum of money. Bailey Building and Loan is a tongue twister. Say it 10 times fast. Bailey Building and Loan. Bailey Building and Loan. Bailey Building and Loan. God. Anyway, after George's uncle loses a bunch of money and puts the family business at risk, George spirals into an existential crisis of self and contemplates suicide. And an angel named Clarence intervenes.
I told you I'm your guardian angel. I know everything about you.
Well, you look about like the kind of an angel I'd get.
And shows George what Bedford Falls, his hometown, would look like if he had never existed. And if he had never existed, it would have led to the town being taken over by the no-good, dirty capitalist Mr. Potter. And Mr. Potter, for all intents and purposes, monopolizes the town, renaming it to Pottersville, and owns everything. It becomes a twisted version of itself, free of all the things that made the community of Bedford Falls a loving and friendly place.
Yes, you got lots and lots of trouble. I'm thinking of the kids in the
the Knickerbocker, shirt tail young ones, peeking in the pool hall window after school. You got trouble, folks, right here in River City. Trouble with a capital T, and that rhymes with P, and that stands for pool.
George, seeing this, understands his value as an individual to the community as a whole. And he also understands, most importantly, the value the community has on the individual, and why it is the duty of the individual, the common person, to make sacrifices for the betterment of the community. Now, what the hell does this have to do with Die Hard? Well, not only has John McTiernan, the director of Die Hard, said that he based themes of Die Hard on It's a Wonderful Life, but John McClane and George Bailey have a lot in common as main characters. But before we get into why they're so similar, let's go over Die Hard's plot and the 80s as a whole. I will assume most of you have seen Die Hard, but if you haven't, the plot is super simple. This is the plot. John McClane travels to LA to see his wife for Christmas. She has moved there for a job. John, through subtle and not so subtle hints, shows that he resents her for this. While at a Christmas party, terrorists show up. Professor Snape is the main terrorist. Shenanigans ensue. John loses his shoes, steps on glass, makes friends with Urkel's uncle, drops Snape from a window like Snape did to Dumbledore, ends up saving the day, and learns a lesson of duty, sacrificing the importance of family. Super simple plot. But what is brilliant about this movie is not the plot. It's the layers of themes and subtleties mixed into it to make it an incredibly subversive movie for the time. So remember how I said the 80s was a decade marked by grand narratives coming back by way of the blockbuster, but also had existential movies of people grappling with their place in the world? Well, just like the 40s,
that's not entirely accurate.
The 80s were a bit more complicated than that. A chunk of the movies in the 80s were either outright critiques of consumerism and capitalism, masquerading as glorifying them, Wall Street being the pinnacle of such films, where the moral to the story was greed is not good, but for a generation this movie poisoned the minds of boomers and they only hear the line,
"Greed, for lack of a better word, is good."
Or they are outright glorifications of ambition-seeking characters that paid no consequences for their actions. I mean, come on. Risky Business is literally about an underage kid hiring a prostitute, then persuaded by said prostitute, turns his parents' house into a brothel. And he gets into Princeton because of it. No consequences. The 80s were something else, folks. Also, remember when I just said in It's a Wonderful Life, the main tragedy George has to face in his journey is seeing his town destroyed by rampant capitalism and consumerism? Well, I was born a year shy of being born in the 80s, but from what I can gather from the movies, that is the 80s in the nutshell. Anyway, what the hell does this have to do with Die Hard? And to finally answer the question, why is Die Hard a Christmas movie? First of all, let's define what a Christmas movie is.
Get on with it.
Yes, get on with it!
Oh, I am enjoying this scene.
Get on with it!
Christmas movies throughout time have shared common themes. One of these common themes is why togetherness is so important. We can see this in such films as Christmas Vacation, The Polar Express, The Family Stone, and Home Alone. And the thing about Home Alone is, like, why do we debate whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie? Home Alone and Die Hard essentially have the exact same plot.
You're very perceptive.
And if I was to guess, I would guess that Home Alone is a ripoff of Die Hard. And I mean this. I mean, you think about it. Both of the movies involve a single hero. One is John McClane, one is Macaulay Culkin, standing up against thieves.
You're amazing. You figured this all out already.
And they're both Home Alone and Die Hard. It's about being separated from the family, being separated from the pack, and being on your own and having to be resourceful against these thieves or terrorists trying to break into a building or a house.
Yippee-ki-yay, mother.
I mean, Home Alone and Die Hard, they're basically the same movie. They're essentially the same movie, but we don't debate whether Home Alone is a freaking Christmas movie, but we debate whether Die Hard is a Christmas movie. And I think that is horribly offensive. And it just makes me so angry. Goes into my next point about Christmas movies, is that a lot of Christmas movies, most if not all, include elements and themes of individuals sacrificing their wants and needs for the betterment of the community. It's a Wonderful Life is a primary example of this. We also see this in A Christmas Carol, Miracle on 34th Street, The Grinch, and Jingle All the Way. How all people are interconnected during Christmas is also a major theme in a lot of Christmas movies. 3 of my favorite Christmas movies are specifically about this: Love Actually, Serendipity, and The Holiday. But the most important aspect of Christmas movies as a genre is about the event of Christmas in relationship to the family. From A Christmas Story to Elf to the Santa Claus, we can see how Christmas movies in large part transcend other genres in telling stories about how important family is, especially family during the holidays. So with that in mind, let's get into why Die Hard is a Christmas movie. So here's a detailed breakdown of all the characters in Die Hard that you need to know. And my brother wanted me to put this in here because he hasn't seen the movie in a while and he got confused. So here are the characters, and I'm speeding this up by 2 because this is already too long.
This is the villain of the story, Hans Gruber. He and some terrorists invade a Christmas party, and their goal is to steal millions of dollars worth of bearer bonds in the safe of this company's safe. This is John McClane. He's our hero. He's trying to stop the terrorists and Hans Gruber from stealing a whole bunch of money. This is John's wife. She works at the company where the Christmas party was invaded by terrorists, and she's the reason why John is at said Christmas party. This is Al. He's the cop on the outside that is assisting our hero. This is his boss. I don't know his name, but he's an incompetent police chief or something. This is Harry Ellis. He is a employee of the company, and he presumably works in sales in some capacity. This is the owner of the company, Mr. Takagi. And these 2 guys are FBI agents that show up to try to help, but they end up not. So that's what you need to know for this section. These are the characters.
And again, the director of Die Hard said he based a lot of this movie on It's a Wonderful Life. So let's look at the similarities. Let's start with our main characters, George Bailey and John McClane. They're both reluctant heroes driven by a sense of duty for his family and or community. They both realize the impact one man can have on those he loves. They both have a disdain for consumerism and capitalism and greed. They both are oddly vulnerable male characters for their time. And they both realize during Christmas that family and togetherness is really what matters.
Truly, you have a dizzying intellect.
Wait till I get going! Where was I?
Ah, but you may be saying, they're just sort of similar characters. That doesn't mean Die Hard is a Christmas movie. To you, I say strap in, we're just getting started. In George Bailey's nightmare sequence in It's a Wonderful Life, Mr. Potter turns the town into Pottersville to exploit it. In Die Hard, we get a reference to this scene.
Due to the Nakatomi Corporation's legacy of greed around the globe, they are about to be taught a lesson in the real use of power. When Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer. It's beautiful.
Is this what this is all about? Our project in Indonesia? Contrary to what you people may think, we're going to develop that region, not exploit it.
I believe you. I read the article in Forbes,
where Mr. Takagi makes a direct reference by saying, we are going to develop the area, not exploit it, which is a tongue-in-cheek way of saying they are definitely going to exploit that area.
I read the article in Forbes.
We also see rampant consumerism and greed as a major through line of Die Hard and It's a Wonderful Life.
Got everything in this mug, man. Look at this. CD, CB, TV, telephone, full bar, VHS. If your friends have to trot, you know, a few mama bears we can hook up with.
Not only do we see this with Hans Gruber as the villain.
Nice suit. John Phillips, London. I have two myself. Rumor has it Arafat buys his there. I could talk about industrialization and men's fashions all day, but I'm afraid work must intrude. It's a very nice suit, Mr. Takagi. To be ashamed to ruin it.
Where he, just like Mr. Potter, is revealed that Hans has no guiding values other than greed and personal ambition.
We'll be sitting on a beach, earning 20%.
Point out here that John McTiernan has said, and I'm paraphrasing, that the only way he could make a movie critiquing rampant greed and consumerism and have it be palatable to the masses is to do it as a Christmas movie.
So you got any Christmas music?
Just like with It's a Wonderful Life. Subtle critiques of consumerism of the 80s are also a constant throughout this movie. John McTiernan intentionally added this line.
Hey, Argyle, what do we do now?
Was hoping you could tell me.
It's my first time driving a limo.
It's okay. It's my first time riding in one.
In the movie to establish John McClane not only as an everyman, but also to serve as a parody of other high-flying action heroes like James Bond. Consumerism is also shown as a distraction throughout the film. Here we see Argyle blissfully unaware of the chaos and trouble roaring around him.
Argyle, tell me you heard the shots. You're calling the police right now.
Of course I'm still coming by later. Sweetheart, have I ever lied to you? My boss thinks I'm on my way to Vegas.
The terrorists are also not immune to the pull of consumerism in this movie. This is a very subtle moment, but I think it really encapsulates how the movie deals with the lampooning of 80s consumerism. A terrorist eyes a candy bar and he can't resist the urge to eat it while waiting to shoot cops trying to breach the building. It's ridiculous. We also see the emptiness of chasing ambition and greed with characters like Harry Ellis.
What are you going to do?
Hey, babe, I negotiate $1 million deals for breakfast. I think I can handle this Euro trash. It's obvious you're not some dumb schmuck up here to snatch a few purses. Am I right?
You're very perceptive.
I figure you're here to negotiate. Am I right?
You're amazing. You figured this all out already.
Business is business. You use a gun, I use a fountain pen. What's the difference? Hans, Bobby, I'm your white knight.
This is an empty man who believes in his own egotistical lust for greed and his abilities so much that it ends up getting him killed. We also see this in the reporter who tries to exploit this tragedy that's going on and John's family just for views.
All right, get back. No, por favor, señor.
All right.
No está.
Look, you let me in right now or I call the INS.
And all of this stands in stark contrast to John McClane, who, while he also believes in his own abilities to save the day, his abilities and motivations are rooted in his duty to the community as a police officer.
What does he think he's doing?
His job.
But of course, I can't mention that the building itself, and to also paraphrase again the director, is meant to be an effigy to capitalism and consumerism.
When Alexander saw the breadth of his domain, he wept, for there were no more worlds to conquer.
And in the end, it is destroyed. If we are to take John McTiernan, Die Hard's word for it, he based large portions of this movie on It's a Wonderful Life. Then we can take tearing down this effigy to greed as something George Bailey might have done if he never woke up and was stuck in Pottersville. Or to say it another way, in this movie, it seems that John McTiernan is quite explicitly saying that we as a culture have developed into a real-life Pottersville. And just like with Pottersville, the charm of the past have been washed away by overconsumption and greed. I mean, I don't know how more on the nose you can get with this by tearing down a monument to capitalist greed and ambition in the movie. And it's not that John destroys it. John was trying to save this building. It was destroyed by more greed. Hans Gruber's greed.
When they touch down, we'll blow the roof. They'll spend a month sifting through the rubble, and by the time they figure out what went wrong, we'll be sitting on a beach earning 20%.
Which I think is wildly fascinating. And you may be asking yourself this question again. What on earth does this have to do with Christmas? That is a very good question. Well, when taking the themes of the distracting nature of consumerism, the pillaging of communities, and the downfall of literal greed, then putting them up against the main internal conflicts John McClane is going through, we start to see themes present in how we previously defined what a Christmas movie is. John's entire inner conflict is about forgiving his wife for taking a job in LA and understanding that at the end of the day, their family is far more important than what he wants her to do.
I don't think you have a clue as to what my idea of our
I know
marriage should be.
exactly what your idea of our marriage should be.
We see this constantly throughout the film, where by the end, he just wants her to know that she is more important to him than his wants or needs.
I told her it took me a while to figure out what a jerk I've been. That when things started to pan out for her, I should have been more supportive. And I just should have been behind her more. She's heard me say I love you 1,000 times. She never heard me say I'm sorry.
Which brings us to the themes of family and personal sacrifice through duty to the community. Just like with George Bailey in It's a Wonderful Life, John McClane is driven by his duty to the community.
What does he think he's doing?
his job.
On the face, this may seem painfully obvious, but there are a lot of layers to this. For instance, the primary relationship between Urkel's uncle and John McClane is about their individual duty to the community. We see this in the obvious examples of John McClane being an off-duty cop, jumping up to save the day like an 80s action hero, but we also see this in how they were both given the opportunity several times to step back and let those who should be more equipped to handle this situation, but aren't, take the reins.
We do not want your help. Is that clear? We don't want your help.
Anytime you want to go home, you consider yourself dismissed. No, sir. You couldn't drag me away.
They refuse, though, and they keep fighting as they see those in authority are too disconnected from what's really happening to know what to do.
It's panic fire. They can't see anything. They're shooting at the lights. They're going after the lights. Pull them back.
These two characters, by their very nature, represent the common man. They have an interconnectedness to them, just like how we defined in What is a Christmas Movie. These two men don't know each other, but are united and understand each other because of their sense of duty to the community. We even have a moment that to me is shocking, was even in a movie in 1989, where Al tells a story of how he accidentally shot a kid, and by doing so, he failed at his duty to the community as a whole.
You know, when you're a rookie, they can teach you everything about being a cop except how to live with a mistake.
He is redeemed by shooting a terrorist, so I guess the moral here is that murder can only be redeemed by more murder. I don't know. It was the 80s. This is also shown in more subtle ways by having these two characters be the only ones who act with really any intelligence in the entire movie. More intelligence than the other cops, the FBI, or anybody. Because they are the only two people in authority in this movie who are not driven by their own egos and personal ambition.
The Slick! Saigon! Hey, Slick!
I was in junior high, dickhead.
They are by design the two same characters in the madhouse of egotism and ambition. But it's these scenes that make John such a relatable everyman. So much so that we can picture what it would be like climbing in that ventilation shaft. Also, I believe it's this intense relatability that John has that is the cause for the impetus for the delineation John makes with Hans when Hans says he's just John Wayne and John replies, I prefer Roy Rogers. Roy Rogers was a family-friendly singing cowboy, and John Wayne was this larger-than-life, rugged individualist hero who, without fail, always saves the day. When we look at John through this lens, we start to understand his character a little bit better. And we also see that this everyman hero, just as in It's a Wonderful Life, it's the common person, not the action hero, who saves us from our worst inclinations as a society. The most brilliant part of this movie, though, is that it's a wonderfully subversive take on greed and rampant capitalism, much like It's a Wonderful Life, while doing it as an 80s action blockbuster. It would be like if somebody made a superhero movie or show today just to convey the emptiness and absurdity in the idea of a hero coming to save us as a society. Oh wait, they did do that. Maybe that's another video. So knowing all of that, let's go back to our definition of what a Christmas movie is and what themes must be in a Christmas movie. Number one, the importance of togetherness. We see this not only in John's journey to save his wife and the Christmas party as a whole, but also the inner conflict of accepting his wife beyond how he wants her to be.
Nice suit.
Number two, interconnectedness. We see this again in John's relationship with Urkel's uncle. Again, these two men do not know each other, but are connected by their sense of duty to the community. Number three, individual sacrifice for the sake of the community. I think this is self-explanatory here. The man saved this whole building without wearing any shoes, for God's sake. Number four, Christmas as an event and its relationship to the family. Again, John's main motivation here is to not only save his marriage, as we can see in the initial argument in this film, but it's also to save his wife, and in doing so, save his family. So to wrap this up, not only does Die Hard hit all the high points of a Christmas movie, the layers and motifs that are added into its simple plot structure make it far deeper than it has any business being. And again, the director based large portions of this movie and its themes on It's a Wonderful Life. What I love about this film is that it is so simple. And because it's so simple, themes and motifs can be layered like a cake that can add significant depth to the characters and the story, while being able to make the concepts the director is trying to make available to the audience more palatable and easier to understand. And because of all of this, it's far more than an 80s action movie. It is an 80s action Christmas movie.
Merry Christmas.